My name, I'm Bobby Fulbright. In justice we trust. I was originally planning on making a tier list of all the Trails characters throughout the series. But with how long my videos tend to be, and me currently working on part 2 of my timeline video for the series, I want to be done for a good while on that project. The thing is, however, that I do want to discuss these characters because Trails has some of my favorite casts in all of video games. This is why I made the decision to make individual videos on each of the characters instead. For the first character in this video series, I'll be talking about Rean Schwarzer, the protagonist of Trails of Cold Steel.
And his name is Rean Schwarzer, of Class 7.
Voiced by Sheen Chiplock, Rean is a 17-year-old noble of the Schwarzer family, as well as a swordsman who trained under Master Yun Kafai, a well-known swordmaster who has trained other important characters throughout the series. And Rean is his most recent and youngest apprentice. Rean's story begins on his first day at Thor's military academy. What I like about Rean's introduction here is that in comparison to other protagonists, we basically know nothing about him, and for the remainder of Cold Steel 1's prologue, as well as half of Chapter 1, Rean remains basically a question mark as far as his past and background goes. Similar to Joshua, it sets an aura of mystery around Rean. We are also shown these brief yet chilling flashbacks of his childhood that only adds to that mystery. As we get to know him throughout the game, Rean often helps out his fellow classmates. One of my favorite scenes in the whole game is one of Laura's bonding events where she's struggling with her emotions regarding Fee, and Rean offers his own advice.
That's what I'm talking about! That's why he's the MVP! That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT!
Another fantastic scene is yet another bonding event, this time involving Instructor Sarah, where she's about to tell him her backstory. But Rean tells her not to, and instead prefers that she would tell him about her past when he's older and wiser. It's cute too because they actually follow up on this later in Cold Steel 3. It's moments like this where, despite his age, Rean is surprisingly mature, and I love that about him. But it needs to be noted that there is far more to his character than just being a good and wise person. Within the prologue, we get an interesting scene. Sarah opens a trap that causes Rean and his classmates to fall in, and in a matter of seconds, Rean stops at nothing to ensure Elisa has a safe landing, leading to an accident/misunderstanding.
Still, I'm just glad you're okay. That's what's really important here, right?
Oh, help me God, I'll slap you in the face so hard!
Goofy anime tropes aside, trust me, this is important. Later in Chapter 1, we have an interesting encounter with Laura. Analyzing his movements throughout the chapter, she asks Rean out of the blue,
I was unsure whether to ask or not, but I've decided that this question bears answering. Why have you chosen to hold back?
suggesting that Rean has more to offer as far as his abilities as a swordsman goes. In addition to that, she wants to spar so they can test their skills so he can reach his full potential, as Laura is the type of person to expect the very best out of people. Surprisingly, however, Rean refuses, telling her that he dropped out of Master Kafai's training midway and downplays his own skills.
I'm nothing special, though. I'm just a dropout who's never even been able to progress past beginner level. I did train under Master Kafai for a while, but I started to feel like I couldn't go any further with my abilities, and he cut my training short.
What?
So I'm really not holding back. Honest. I actually kind of feel like I'm dirtying the good name of the Eight-Leaf School, in fact. but this is my limit. I'm sorry I can't quite live up to your expectations.
You have no reason to apologize to me. This is a matter you must come to terms with on your own. Though I'll admit to some disappointment, I was hoping you'd prove to be a good sparring partner.
They resolved their conflict the next morning, but much like that scene with Elisa from before, it's important to keep this scene as well in mind. Next, in Chapter 2, we visit Eustace's childhood home on a field study, and overnight, Rean has a conversation with him. Much like Laura, Eustace has noticed something peculiar about him. Earlier that day, them and their other classmates were doing a request where a monster got the drop on them, and Rean jumped into harm's way in order to protect Machias and Eustace as they were bickering. At first glance, this may seem like an honorable sacrificial moment, but Eustace sees this differently.
You just keep reminding me how unlike a noble you truly are. Still, from where I stand, you are something of a danger to yourself.
I am?
On the day of the entrance ceremony, when the trapdoor opened beneath us, you acted instantly to protect Elisa. There wasn't even a moment's hesitation.
Ah.
In most cases, one would reflexively act to protect himself. It's part of man's natural survival instinct. Yet you put another before yourself, not even pausing to question the validity of that decision. And you did exactly the same thing with us today. I'm sure most people would see that as an act of selflessness and sing your praises for it. But to me, it comes across as abnormal, perhaps even twisted.
I don't know how to respond to that. I wasn't expecting you to see through me quite so clearly.
And finally in Chapter 4, where we meet Rean's younger not-sister, we get the answers to Rean's actions throughout the game up to this point. More than a decade ago, Rean was abandoned by his biological father and adopted into the Schwarzer family by Rean Schwarzer. However, the members of the Noble Alliance took offense to this, as they believed that nobles are the superior human race, and placing a commoner within their families was an insult. Tia was then banished and stripped of his power, and was mocked by other noble families for simply adopting a child of commoner blood. Rean, as he got older, began to feel guilty for causing his adopted parents so much pain, and saw himself as nothing but a burden to them. In addition to that, when Rean and Elise were still kids, she was attacked by a monster, and Rean slaughtered it using a specific power, which terrified him as he was unable to control his anger. This is why he tends to pull self-sacrificial stunts and downplays his abilities like we've seen so far.
What did you mean by, even if I don't though, I doubt I'll be coming back home to live? Or by wanting to repay mother and father? You make it sound as though you intend to sever ties with them.
Rean on the surface may seem like he's just a goody two-shoes who sees the good in everyone, gives friendship speeches to bolster his friends' spirits, and is generally a nice and well-respected person. He'll even go as far as to attempt to redeem a friend who has done horrible things, as we'll see later. But despite all that, that doesn't necessarily mean he views himself in the same way. Rean would much rather sacrifice himself for his loved ones' futures because he doesn't see a future for his own self. That, right there, is the core dilemma of his character.
Why does he never think about what would make him happy?
I tend to see people in the Trails community criticize Rean for being too much of a shonen protagonist, or a goody two-shoes. And while yes, there are moments where he does feel like one with the way he interacts with people, such as the two examples regarding Laura and Sarah that I mentioned before, he is still so much more. I'd argue it's more accurate to say he's a deconstruction of a shonen protagonist. Not that I think his moments where he gives his friends advice are bad anyway, because how dare the protagonist be a good person, am I right? And besides, as someone who loves Sora from Kingdom Hearts and Rex from Xenoblade Chronicles 2, I love these type of characters. Seriously, give me a character who just yells about friendship and I'll eat that shit up. But, like I said, there's far more to Rean's character than just his shonen moments, as he very clearly has self-loathing issues. After storming off, Elise heads to the old schoolhouse where she is attacked by an armored knight. To save her, Rean then once again uses his hidden power, the same ability he used all those years ago, known as his ogre form. He's able to keep it a secret here, but the cat is out of the bag when he reveals it to his friends during his fight with Victor Arced later in Chapter 5. Despite this, in the final chapter of the game, Rean is grateful for the friends he's made, including some of the seniors such as Crow, and Victor's words from before were able to affect him. So Rean is finally starting to see that he might have a future for himself. But that all changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Everything went downhill when Crow unexpectedly shoots Osborne in the heart in an act of revenge, who was hired by the leader of the four great houses. This causes a civil war with the nobles attempting a coup, and Rean is then separated from Class 7. Transitioning into Cold Steel 2, at the beginning we see Rean at his lowest so far. Everything that he's bottled up leading up to this point is now out in the open.
I don't have the right to be treated kindly. I don't deserve to have others putting themselves out for me.
But Elise is able to snap him out of it, and he sets off to find his scattered classmates. You know, before getting separated from Elise herself.
Yes, Sonic, I got your bitch. I got it in the palm of my hand.
Down, Eggman!
You put yourself down.
Using Valimar, one of the 7 Divine Knights of Ancients Past, which he found at the end of Cold Steel 1, Rean fights back against the Noble Alliance in the Civil War, reunites with his friends, and even finds a way to control his ogre powers, using a technique known as Spirit Unification. He then prepares for his fated final showdown with Crow, promising Toa and her friends that he'll bring them back to his senses. And Valimar, despite acting like a generic robot at first, is revealed to have his own personality, and forms a bond with Rean. I bring this up because Valimar will play a role in Rean's growth moving forward. As the war goes on, Rean will consistently blame himself for what happens to others in the story, such as Vulcan, one of the terrorists of the Liberation Front who killed himself because he had no reason to live, and Rean failed to save him. Even so, his friends and Valimar help him feel better, so he pushes forward, eventually leading to him saving Scarlet, another terrorist who had also attempted suicide. Moments like these show that there is still a part of Rean that can't help but lean towards his self-loathing habits. Heh, that rhymed. It's not long after we finally arrive at the climactic fight with Crow, and Rean wins. However, in an unfortunate turn of events, Douche Cayenne, the leader of the Noble Alliance, merged Prince Cedric, the son of the King of Erebonia, with the Vermilion Knight, Testarossa. And in a last-minute decision, Crow sacrificed himself to save the prince. Though the most shocking thing about CS2 isn't even Crow's death, but rather the reveal that Gileath Osborne, one of the major antagonists of this entire series, is still alive, and has been pulling the strings this whole time. In addition to that, an even more shocking twist is revealed. He is actually Rean's biological father. Rean, however, has no time to process this revelation, because Osborne blackmails his own son to participate in the occupation of Crossbell City, which had previously declared independence for itself. Rean being forced to help Erebonian soldiers to launch an attack on the city eventually leads to a confrontation with Lloyd Bannings, a citizen of Crossbell. What's worse, as he returned to Thor's, his classmates were able to graduate early to pursue their own personal careers, which meant Rean was left behind to continue his studies, leaving him all alone. Throughout this entire game, it is a story about Rean building himself back up from the pain of separation that the ending of Cold Steel 1 thrust upon him. He takes back his friends, his school, defeats his rival, and is even hailed as a hero. And the reward for everything he's done? Sadness.
I'm so sorry. I promised I'd bring him back.
Now recognized as a hero in the nation onward, it's not long after where Rean was once again forced by Osborne to participate in another occupation, that being of North Ambria. And within that war, he had once again lost control of his ogre powers. Despite his loneliness and frustrations, he did at the very least have Altina to keep him company. As we continue forward into Trails of Cold Steel 3, 2 years have passed, and Rean is now 19 to 20 years old. But that begs the question, after he graduated, what profession did he decide to seek out? Toval even suggested he should become a bracer. But in the end, Rean ultimately decided to follow in Seraf's footsteps by becoming an instructor himself. Now he's teaching his own class of students, known as the new Class 7. I love this development for his character, as Rean is much wiser now, and we really get to see the good guy persona of his at the front, which we only saw bits and pieces here and there in the previous games. Seriously, I already loved Rean in the first 2 games, but here he's even more awesome in this game and afterwards.
Well, I'm proud of you. There are some areas each of you could improve on, but you just need to tackle them one at a time. I'm sure today hasn't instilled you with much faith in the idea of Class 7. Your class size and this trial are bound to raise some red flags. Then you have an instructor who's only just graduated. What if he doesn't know what he's doing? Like I said, if you want to transfer to classes 8 or 9, I swear that I'll make it happen. But it's something I want you to decide for yourselves. Think hard about what you believe, what you want to accomplish, what kind of future you want, and, most importantly, who you are. Only you can figure out if Class 7 is the right place for you. Take all that to heart, and I know you'll have your answer.
Will you adopt me? What?
Despite his position as a role model for his students, however, Rean is still suffering from the issues he had as a student himself. As he continues his habits of doing his self-sacrificial stunts to protect others a lot more consistently now, to the point where even his own students are taking notice of this.
Just shut up, damn it!
That's enough out of you! Quit trying to act all tough!
I see a fair amount of people criticize Cold Steel 3 for reverting Rean back to being depressed again, when Cold Steel 2 supposedly resolved that part of himself. But I feel like anybody who actually thinks that didn't pay attention to his character. Because as I mentioned earlier in the video, it's pretty clear even after that scene in the intermission in Cold Steel 2 that Rean does still, to an extent, hate himself. And throughout Cold Steel 3, we clearly see that he's still mad at himself for not saving Crow. And besides, who wouldn't get messed up after losing such a close friend that he had initially promised to bring to his senses? In addition to everything afterwards, such as becoming Osborn's lapdog and participating in the Northern War. I don't know about you, but if I was in his position, I'd be depressed as heck too. After all the adventures Rean has with the students, and reuniting with the original Class 7, it all comes to a head in the game's finale, where it's revealed that both Milliam and Altina were created to become the Sword of the End. Wait, wrong game. The Sword of the End was needed in order to release a curse from the Holy Beast of Earth, which was being kept underground. This curse will then spread across the continent, and attempts to influence humanity, like a devil's ear. And Altina was chosen to be the one to become the sword. Milliam, however, makes the decision to sacrifice herself to save Altina, which causes Rean to go berserk, and he uses the now transformed Milliam to slaughter the Holy Beast of Earth, directly playing into Osborn's, Black Albrecht's, and Ishmelga's plans, ending on one of the most insane cliffhangers I've ever seen for a game. Now we're on to Cold Steel 4, and after Rean is saved from being held captive, he's at the lowest point he's ever been. If everything he was going through before wasn't bad enough, Rean feels guilty for killing the Holy Beast of Earth, as the Great Twilight wouldn't have happened in the first place if he had controlled his anger. His hair being permanently white is a consequence of this. He even admits to Laura in one of her bonding events that he'll likely try to sacrifice himself to bring an end to the Great Twilight, believing that's the only solution to atone for what he's done. Emma at one point even attempts to sacrifice herself using a spell so that Rean wouldn't go down that road, showing that his friends are worried about his mental state. One of my favorite scenes in the game is when Rean reunites with Lloyd Bannings on the Pantagruel, where he offers to shake his hand. But Rean refuses, believing that he doesn't deserve to, given his role in starting the war, though Lloyd has his own response to this.
No, Rean. That's wrong. No, Rean. That's wrong. It's my duty as a detective to look beyond what's on the surface. You want to know what I see? I see that this was all a setup from the very start. Nothing you could have done would have possibly changed the outcome. I see a man who, despite it all, never fell to despair. A man who continues to push back, even at this very moment. Within you lies the strength of countless allies, helping you move forward through whatever may come. I'd like the SSS to be a part of that, Rean. To be one of those allies there by your side. Empire or Crossbell, where we're from doesn't matter anymore. Now we're fighting for the world itself. Together.
And in Cold Steel 4's finale, we see him do exactly what the game had been foreshadowing. After defeating Osborn, the last opponent in the rivalries, Rean makes the difficult decision to absorb Ishmelga, the source of the curse and the Great Twilight, and flies off into the distance to destroy it and himself, once and for all. All while his friends and loved ones watch in horror as they desperately plead for him to change his mind.
No!
And that's the end of Rean Schwarzer's story. At least in the bad ending.
Oh, my dude, you just got pranked. Bet you didn't see that one coming, huh?
After completing a certain side quest and watching the bad ending first, which is important, you'll unlock the true ending. In this alternate scenario, Elisa's father, having freed from Black Albrecht's control, offers a different solution, and Rean is able to defeat Ishmelga without endangering himself. Gileath Osborne then appears, who, despite his evil actions, has actually been sacrificing himself for the world this whole time, much like Rean. Though I'll go deeper into his character in a separate video. He gives his son one last request, which is to live his life to the fullest and not throw himself away, as there are plenty of people out there who love him and would be emotionally affected by those actions. A common theme that can be seen with many other characters throughout these games. With that, Osborne walks away into the afterlife, and Rean happily celebrates Olivier's wedding alongside his friends, with a smile on his face. This is one thing I love about Cold Steel, which is that it takes the storytelling trope where a character sacrifices themselves in order to save the world, and basically says, we don't do that here. Yes, there are moments in life where sacrificing yourself is the only option. And I'm sure you've seen this happen in multiple forms of media, whether it be in a movie, a book, or a video game. Hell, even in real life. But there is a huge difference between making a self-sacrifice in order to save the world, and sacrificing yourself without even trying to find an alternate solution. Especially if you're someone who is just trying to find an excuse to die, completely ignorant of the consequences it could have on the people around you.
Guess I should say sorry, though, for not being strong enough. I wanted to be able to say, I saved the day, that I helped protect everyone. But I never thought I'd cause you guys all this grief instead.
This is why I'm honestly glad that Crow and Milliam were able to get revived in this game. Though, much like Osborne, I'll save discussing those two for another video. For now, we have one more game to cover that continues Rean's story. Despite stopping what would have been the greatest war in the history of the continent, Rean still can't help but feel guilty for his actions. He put an end to the war and the curse, yes, but many people still lost their lives on the single day that the war began and ended. Erebonian soldiers have even attempted to restart the war, so that they can ensure that the lives that were lost, including Osborne, weren't meaningless. Rean even admits to his students that there may still come a day when their lives could be in danger, and he would happily sacrifice himself for their safety, showing that there is still a slight part of him that can't forgive himself. Rean has fought many opponents throughout these games, ranging from terrorists, corrupt soldiers, literal demons, and even his own father. But this time, he will face off against the most powerful and his most important foe, himself. And I mean that literally. As later on in Rean's story, we come across a man wearing a mask, who just so happens to be Rean himself. A little context before I continue. In Reverie, an AI computer known as Elysium has surfaced. I won't go into details for how it was created for simplicity reasons, but all you need to know is that it has the ability to predict the future. Not only that, but it also can predict alternate futures within alternate timelines, and can recreate beings from those alternate timelines within our current timeline. Take my friend Mark here for example.
Oh, hi, Mark.
In our current timeline, he's a pretty chill guy. But one day, an accident occurs where he gets run over by a car. He survives and went on his merry way. However, in an alternate universe, there is an instance where he broke all of his bones from this crash. He then made himself a robot body and became Evil Mark, and vowed to rule the world. Okay, I realize as I'm writing this example is really stupid, but roll with me please. Though remember that Evil Mark only exists in an alternate timeline, so he shouldn't be a threat. But, with the use of Elysium, it can create a copy of this alternate Mark and bring him into our reality. And within Reverie's finale, the mastermind behind the events of the story is revealed to be none other than the alternate version of Rean that OG Rean fought earlier in the game. More specifically, he is the self-sacrificial version of himself from the bad ending from Cold Steel 4. Remember, in the bad ending of CS4, Rean sacrificed his life to defeat Ishmelga. But there's one detail that we didn't know. Rean and Ishmelga within that timeline never actually died. Instead, the two were trapped in a never-ending battle of control, and it lasted for thousands upon thousands of years. In the end, Rean lost all sense of his former self and eventually merged with Ishmelga, creating an entirely new being known as Ishmelga Rean. Wow, what a creative name, Falcom! What I love about this twist is that it once again shows Rean's sacrifice in the previous game had consequences. Both old and new Class 7s even burst into tears at the sight of him, which is reflective of the reactions of their alternate selves to Rean's sacrifice within that bad ending. Thankfully, Rean, Lloyd, and C are able to defeat the part of Ishmelga from within this alternate Rean, and the real Rean is able to have a conversation with him from within the final world. He gives the real Rean an opportunity to defeat Ishmelga for good. But to accomplish this, Rean needs to sacrifice himself. If this was the Rean in Cold Steel 1 through Cold Steel 4, he certainly would take this offer. However, he isn't that person anymore. Rean has realized that while yes, sacrificing himself to save the world is an option, that will come at the cost of hurting his loved ones, and he instead prefers to try to find a third way.
Rean, there was a time when I would have accepted it. When I would have shouldered the burden on my own. I was willing to sacrifice it all if it meant it saved the people I loved. But that didn't save them. Not a bit. Sacrificing myself didn't bring them happiness. Instead, it just broke their hearts. As a catalyst for the great twilight. I didn't believe I had the right to be happy. Honestly, a part of me still believes that. But approaching it as a right or wrong perspective misses the point. I have an obligation to be happy, because our happiness isn't made alone, nor is our unhappiness made alone. If I want the people I love to be happy, then I need to be happy too. So that's my goal right now. And that means I'm through with shouldering the burden alone. From this day forward, I'm going to trust my loved ones. Even the ones I have yet to meet. If we find ourselves up against the same great evil again, then I'm sure we can find a solution that will let all of us continue being happy together. So that's how you want to go about it. So, maybe I am you. But it's plain as day that you are not me. I'm a little jealous.
I could not think of a better way to cap off Rean's story than this. So, with his decision made, Rean is able to escape the final world and go back to his friends, fully embracing that he has a right to be happy. Yeah, this character is freaking amazing. From his interactions with both Class 7s, the mystery surrounding him in Cold Steel 1, him finding a literal Gundam that he forms a bond with, and his moments of low self-esteem, which is both depressing and surprisingly compelling, Rean has genuinely become one of my favorite fictional characters of all time. Even now, when I'm not playing a Trails game, I'm still thinking about this man. His journey across all 5 of the games is an adventure I'll never forget, as it was so satisfying watching his character grow from a teenager to a young adult, and eventually becoming a divine blade as we saw in Cold Steel 4, while also having some of the best drip I've ever seen for a character. Like, I love Sora from Kingdom Hearts, and he's still my overall favorite character in fiction in general, but Rean's outfits clear his by a long shot. I'm sorry. Oh, and I can't forget one of my favorite running gags in the series, where he's super overprotective of Elise. It's so freaking funny. There are so many memorable moments and interactions with this single character that this video would be way too long if I touched on them all. Now, I know there's some people in the Trails fanbase that actually hate Rean because of the anime tropes surrounding him, such as the fact that the girls are all thirsting over him. And looking back in retrospect, I guess I can sorta understand why that's a little annoying, but literally every other protagonist in the series is like that, let alone other characters also have tropey moments. And besides, if you ask me, I think these people are overreacting, because I don't think it's that bad, and I definitely would not say it ruins his character or anything like that. I honestly think it's really funny and even kinda cute that the girls have the hots for him. Not to mention, I personally think Rean's individual relationships with the girls are still compelling enough on their own, regardless of whether you decide to romance them or not. And besides, can you blame them? I mean, I'm not gay, but I totally see the appeal. If anything, it should have been me! Not him! It's not fair! Regardless though, I'll be really interested to see where his character continues in Kai no Kiseki, as trailers for that game have confirmed he will be returning alongside Kevin and C. And it's pretty clear that they're setting up a face-off against Shizuna, a new character introduced in Reverie's Daydreams. But for now, on my Trails character tier list, I'll be putting him in my top 10. And of course, for future videos, I'll place the other characters on this tier list. Although for now, I will see you in the next video. I believe I will start working on my timeline part 2 video now though, so I don't expect an analysis like this for a good while, but I hope you look forward to my next video regardless. Anyway, in Trails we trust!